Welcome everybody. This is a talk that I also gave at Open West. Was anybody here at that? Good. You were. You were? You were at Open West or at my talk?
Oh, Open West.
Okay, Open West. My name's Dave Oswald. I work for Endurance/Bluehost also. I'm also, I organize Perl Mongers, and I work with the Perl Foundation for organizing the Perl conference here in North America also. So I'd like to talk a little bit about Perl one-liners, and justifiably Perl has kind of the reputation for being about this easy to read. And I suppose that probably is Perl. I think that's the regular expression that that appears at the end of Mastering Regular Expressions by Friedel for parsing email addresses. Excuse me? Oh, yeah. And so we're going to try to deobfuscate it a little bit so that we can start using it. Yeah. Is this better? Okay. So we're going to try to learn to deobfuscate Perl in the context of one-liners a little bit. Who here uses a shell, bash, z, sh, whatever? Everybody here, right? In your go-to toolbox of things to use, I imagine there's grep and there's probably awk or sed and some of those sorts of things. Is Perl ever one of those toolbox items? You know, there are a few of us. Hopefully, as we talk about this a little bit, maybe we can start to see some of the additional uses and the fact that this can be one more thing to add to our tool belt. So the basic syntax when using Perl in a one-liner, of course, is to invoke the Perl interpreter and then pass in the switches, and then optionally pass in a program file and some additional arguments for that program file. And the switches, here they are right here, and this will be the end of my talk. Just kidding. We'll go over the switches in a little bit of detail at this point. The first switch is -v, which is used to, this is hyphen capital V, no, -v, lowercase, which is used to tell us what Perl version we're using. And so, is this legible from where everybody's sitting? Perl -v, and it tells us we're using Perl 5.26, and that's pretty boring. So something that's a little bit more useful that everybody should be doing before they commit any code is what? Perl what? Anybody know? C. What does Perl -c do? It's a syntax check. Perl -c is just a syntax check. Does it compile? Have we tripped up anything that would cause it to not compile? Perl's documentation is actually pretty good by some definitions of good. If you type at the command line perldoc Perl run, then you will get a extensive man page that starts like this and then goes on for quite a while after that, describing the tools. And so here's an introduction to the tools. Typically, when you do a Perl one-liner, you're going to start off with Perl -e. Anybody want to guess what -e does? Execute or evaluate, right? Same thing in this case. So -e, here's an example of a hello world. Perl -e print hello world, and then we get the output. This would be approximately equivalent to this Perl script, where we start off with a shebang line and then the actual print statement. So if you compare them, they're essentially the same thing. The -e is doing it as a one-liner, and here we've written a script that we would invoke. And this is, you know, this would be similar to echo hello world, for example. But what if we want to do something that's a little bit more elaborate? In this code snippet, this is going to be a code snippet that we would actually put in a file and run. The while defined local so-and-so, and then print. We want to, how can we implement that type of a loop and then do some meaningful work inside of the loop there? Well, Perl provides a way of doing that. First of all, what is actually going on here? The angle braces here are telling Perl to go ahead and read from standard in. one line at a time from standard in, and then essentially we're just printing that line here at the end of the while loop. And this is totally useless, right? It's the equivalent of cat, for example. But it's totally useless. What's really interesting is if we could do something in place of those dots there, right? So internally here, Perl is using the angle operator, the spaceship. It's not spaceship. What would you call it? The diamond operator. There you go. To read from each file that's listed on argv, or if there's nothing in argv, then it'll read from standard in. And so in Perl's documentation, I came across this gem, that a concept in Perl is only valid if it can be expressed as a one-liner. And so we're going to see how to do this as a one-liner, and here it is right here. Perl PE. P tells Perl to go ahead and wrap a while loop around what it's about to evaluate, and where I had ... before, that's what corresponds with this ... here. So this right here is essentially the same as this right here. Not exactly the same, but pretty darn close. And so this is essentially implementing a cat. But what we get to do here is where we have ... right here, we can insert our own code that will operate on each line of the file and then dump it to standard out, unless you use shell redirection. Here's an example. So now we want to, what it's really doing is, let's say we want to do this now. We want to take the new line off of the end of the line of each line of the script that's coming in, and then we want to do something in our ... and then we want to go ahead and add that new line back in and then print it. Well, that's what the L flag does. So let's take a look here. I can't really see what I'm going to be typing. Well, actually I can, because you can't see it. Let's change this over. Can we now see something there? Let's try this. Do I have this file? No, I don't. Oh, I don't have anything. I can't type backwards. There we go. So now there's nothing in this little script here, but we'll do this. Perl hyphen PE, and in our quotes we'll put nothing, and then we'll go ahead and do my test.pl. And we got a cat. We essentially catted it. But what happens if I do this inside of the single quotes? Oops. We'll tell Perl to substitute. And let's substitute our S's for some hash symbols there. And now let's go ahead and hit that. And you can see on each line, let's put a G after that too, so that it does every occurrence. So now we have done some simple substitution and replacement within our Perl one-liner. So let's say we want to reverse all of the characters in every word in a dictionary. This is really useful. I'm sure this is something that everybody needs to do at least once a week, right? Or never, unless you're giving a talk. So here we're going to say Perl PLE $_ is the, as we're iterating through each line of the input files, $_ right here receives the line of input. It is a container for an individual line of input. And so now we're going to say $_ equals reverse, and it's going to reverse our dictionary's words, each word in my dictionary called 2 of 12 inf. Or we want to count by fives. For the sequence of 1 to 10, we'll say Perl -e $_ times equals 5. So now we're going to count 5, 10, 15, 20 up to 100 essentially. Yes? Excuse me?
What's the -L?
Oh, -L. -L causes new lines to be chomped off before you start processing the input, and then added back in when you're done processing it. So thanks, good question. In fact, it's funny you should ask that because it was my next slide. So it chomps the input and adds the new line to the output. -P creates a loop that iterates over the lines of the input and carries out any actions in the code block and then prints each line. Now here's a special variable called $. What does $. Give us? Anybody know? Half of the people in here know and the other half don't know. Nobody knows? $. is the line of the file that you are reading from, of the input file. So if I do this, then I am going to print out each line of the file and then the line itself, right? $. This is not helping deobfuscate Perl, is it? I'm not dispelling the sentiment that Perl is hard to read. Right here, for each line of the file, $_ receives the line of the file. We're now going to reassign to $_, which is the line number that we're on in the file, and there will be a space after it. We're going to catenate using a dot, and then we're going to catenate to it the original line of the file. And so for each word in my dictionary, it's going to go ahead and put a word number, put a line number in front of that word in the dictionary. $. is a special variable that contains the line number of the most recently read input from the files that were entered on the command line. So sometimes printing every line of input is not wanted, and we've been using the -P shortcut or command line switch to cause Perl to wrap a while loop and then automatically print each line. But if we use -N, then we get the while loop without the implicit print. And so here's an example, Perl -NE. So N means wrap a while loop that reads from each line of the file, but we're not going to implicitly print. Now we're going to explicitly print, but only if the line starts with TH. So in other words, we're going to print every line in the dictionary that starts with the letters TH here, and also what line number it came on. Yes?
What's the P for?
The
Previous slide, what was the P for?
Oh, so the P, if I had put a P instead of the N, then it would have implicitly printed every single line. But if I use an N instead of a P, then there's no implicit agreement that it's going to print. It'll wait for me to put a print statement there. Yeah. And so we're going to only print if we match.
Can you put an N and a P at the same time?
I'm sorry?
Can you put N and P at the same time?
Technically, Perl would allow it, but I don't know what the behavior would be. I don't think that it would be useful.
Okay.
I think, would it allow it? Let's try. Let's see what if it even allows it.
Yeah.
We got the P behavior.
What if you switch the...
Oh, if you switch it around? Good question, too. Let's try that. We still got the P behavior. P wins. P for the win. Oh, what, are we recording this? So how about if we just want to get a line count? Now, the easiest thing would be probably to use WC -L and then tail 1 or something like that. But instead, let's just get a line count. So this means we need something to only happen one time after the loop is done. So to do that, we're going to tell Perl that we want in an AND block to print. And we're going to, on each iteration, to increment a counter, C, and we're only going to do so if the line matches TH at the beginning. So for each line of the file, if the file starts with a TH, then go ahead and increment my counter, and I should probably, there's no reason to put a print. Well, this will print every word, but we can take that out if we want. But then at the very end, after the loop is completely terminated, then we'll go ahead and print the value that is in C, so we know how many words matched TH. Or we could have used WC, right? But this is, this is a Perl talk. So, in fact, here's an equivalent using grep, TH, and then pipe it into WCL. Yes?
So I have a question. This is something about Perl I've noticed that sometimes I'll have the if will be on the end of the line, sometimes the if statement will be up at the
Yes.
end of the line.
So
The reason why the previous example you have the if on the end, I mean, this one you have on the front, 'cause you still don't have the end.
Yeah,
Because Perl was designed by a linguist.
that's a really good question. So the postfix if can only have one statement in its execution block. And the prefix if can actually have curly braces that can have a block of multiple statements. In my particular example here, the only thing, well, we were actually doing two things. We were incrementing a counter and then we were printing the word. And so in this case, a postfix wouldn't have worked, whereas in the previous example, wherever that was, right here, the only thing that we're doing is printing and nothing else, and so the postfix is okay.
You still have the end block if you have the if as a postfix. So if it says C++, and you didn't have the print, you said if,
Yeah, then I could just say C++
you
if,
still have the end.
yeah, I could still do the end, because that's, syntactically, that's a completely different beast. You're onto another block of code there. So, and the postfix if I were to attach an end block, well, and yeah, I guess I would have to put a semicolon after the postfix if to terminate that statement if I had more coming after it. So let's see. Okay, so n iterates over the lines of a file without printing. You can print explicitly. So n is useful as a filter, similar to grep. And the n block can be used to defer an action until after all of the iteration is done. Input can come from standard in rather than from a file. So in this case, we're piping sequence 1 through 10 into Perl. So that is entering Perl through standard in. And the implicit lines that are being read into $_ on each iteration are coming from standard in over here, being piped in, instead of from a file. And this would be as opposed to this where we have a file name and now it's going to iterate over each line of the file. And this takes us to the next thing. What is this L0? So previously, Doran, you asked what L is for. L trims off the new line, and then just before finally outputting something, puts the new line back. Well, L0 is telling Perl that we want to specify an octal ASCII value as the record separator. So if you consider new line to be a record separator, using L0 and then whatever the octal code for a character is, you can change your record separator to be white space or pipe symbols or whatever you want. So instead of iterating on lines, you're now iterating on some other thing. And actually, -0 sets the output record separator to an octal value as well without doing the implicit chomp and replacement. So an example, just L0 or O oct or L oct. So it actually is really useful if you're working with null terminated sequences. There are a number of Unix commands or Linux commands that can be told to give you your output in null terminated so that you don't run into problems with file names that have embedded new lines, for example. -A, what does that do? Anybody know -A? No? Okay. -A tells Perl to auto-split each line on white space into the special variable $@f, into the special array @f. So now in this, we're going to iterate on each line of df that's being piped into standard in. We're going to iterate over each line in our df, and we're going to say next if it's line 1. We don't want to process it if it's line 1 because that's your header that has the column names. But then for all of the other lines, it's automatically splitting because of -A on white space. And then we want to take the very first field, or the very last field, I'm sorry, and the second to last field and print them for whatever reason. Which will totally blow up if the mount points have white space in them, but then you ought to shoot whoever created those mount points anyway, probably. But just as an example, yeah, what we're doing here, every line of df, we're splitting and we're taking the mount points name right here and the % used, I think, and outputting them. So A auto splits each line on white space into $f. So let's split on comma and change it to a colon. So -f pattern lets you change the auto split character from white space to something else, whatever's in the pattern. So here we're going to auto split on commas, and then we're going to change every comma to a colon. And I don't want to explain this. Okay, dollar quote. Let's see. Dollar quote is the character that is used to join together strings when you interpolate an array inside of double quotes, right? So by changing dollar quote to the colon and then recombining everything that we split on comma, we're recombining it on colons. And so we've changed our CSV file into a colon SV file. So still CSV, I guess.
You're trying to make your examples Damian level of evil, aren't you?
Sorry. Yeah. but what is like the right way to present this, right? There's no good way. But yes, go ahead.
Are all these like assignments to these variables, dollar whatever,
Yeah.
it's a convention? Is there any rhyme or reason to why they choose like,
Dollar underscore? So, oh yeah, so dollar underscore is just implicitly supposed to be known in Perl as the it variable or the topic variable. But the rest of them, who knows? Like who came up with @f? I have no idea. Yes, go ahead.
A lot of these, the variable names are inherited from
Awk.
said,
Yeah.
convention, so that they have the same or nearly equivalent meanings in a lot of things, even older than Perl.
They have some history that was relevant to Larry Wall when he wrote Perl back in 1987 or whatever it was, right?
I assume F is for
No,
field.
This for what?
Field.
Fields. There you go. Thank you. Steve's got it. Fields.
So what is the dollar versus at?
Oh, good question. So if it was $f, then that would represent a single scalar variable or a variable that contains just one thing. And @f represents an array of multiple things, so all of the fields.
This when you use $F.
Yes. Oh, and the reason was, let's go back. Here it is. This is still the,
So it's the same variable.
it's the same variable, but we are dealing with one element of that variable. And so it becomes a scalar value, so it is prefaced with a $sign. If we wanted to deal with the entire container, then you would use the @ sign. And in fact, I could have put an @ here, and then I would be taking a slice of the array, but I'd only be taking a single element slice of the array. So yeah, go ahead.
And Dave, just on something here, I've been doing this, but I've been doing it more painfully lately. I had reasons to do a lot of parsing of like Apache error logs. And I'm constantly piping the error logs through awk, pulling out the columns that I cared about using awk because, I don't know, that was...
Because you hadn't thought about this, right?
And I never realized I could have done it. Well, and then I'm often then piping it through, you know, other things, grep and even some Perl one-liner to manipulate whatever I got out of the...
Yeah.
But I just realized I could have done it.
You could have done this. So,
And I assume that the -a is referencing awk because it's doing essentially what awk does.
that's probably right. So one of the points to this presentation is this isn't necessarily the best way to approach solving this particular problem, but with a little bit of practice and kind of reading the documentation and fiddling, eventually you can add this to your repertoire of ways to approach difficult problems, and maybe at some times it'll be the right way or the easiest way. Here we're doing that one. So the -f with a pattern tells Perl to split on whatever that pattern is, and it uses regular expression semantics, Perl compatible regular expression semantics. And we saw that $quote, which is a Perl special variable that specifies an alternate join delimiter when an array is interpolated into a quoted string. It's kind of crazy. Okay, so transliteration. Here we could have just done it like this. This would have been easier, right? Just transliterate all commas into colons. This would have been easier. But the fact is you shouldn't be doing any of this because that's a naive treatment of CSV anyway. What if it's quoted and has a colon that's not supposed to be a separator? And so this is kind of a naive approach anyway. So now -i. I used to think -i was really cool, and the more I think about it and the more I get familiar or comfortable with shell redirection, the more I hate -i, but we'll talk about it for a second. this right here, Perl-i.back, is telling Perl to go ahead and iterate over my CSV file and transliterate all commas into colons, and then dump my output file back into CSV after making a copy of the original file into CSV.back. So it creates a backup copy of the file you're currently working on, and then it iterates over all of the lines of the file and does an in-place edit of the file that you're working on. And so why I don't like it nowadays is because I would just rather use the greater than sign and dump it into a file. Because then I can dump it into a file that is already a different file name, and I can diff them and make sure I haven't blown up the world. At least this is saving a backup though, right, of your original.
Although when
Yes.
you're doing mass edits across your whole file system, sometimes
Yeah.
it's nice.
It is nice, and because then all of the ones, if you ever have to revert, you've got them, and hopefully you don't have to revert, and everything's already the right new name.
And you can also call I without the dot back. and
You
it'll
can.
cover your-
It'll do an in-place edit, and it'll clobber, and there's no going back. Yeah, unless you're using version control. But yeah.
What I always remember, I mean, this is one of the earliest ones that I learned in Perl, and I learned it because people would say you just need to Perl high something.
Yeah, PIE.
Perl high.
And so what is PIE? P is to iterate, I is to do an in-place edit, and E is to evaluate this code. So Perl-pi. So I represents in-place edit. Here's another example. We're going to transliterate. We're using I.back. I can't remember why I have this slide. It looks like the previous slide. What? Undid what I did before? Oh yeah, I switched it back, and so now it's fixed. Okay, I was trying to remember why I had fixed in my slides. I changed it back to original. But what this right here represents all of this. This is all what's happening in actual Perl code behind the scenes. And so there's a lot there that can be incorporated into just a quick little one-liner. With a lot of power comes the ability to also make a lot of mess. But it can be useful if you know how to use it. So, I've been going about 30 minutes. Are we okay? We want to go on a little bit further? 5 more minutes? Okay. EOF. So let's talk about this. What if I have multiple files that I'm passing in? How do we know where one file ends and the next file starts? Perl doesn't really care. It'll automatically do our in-place edits, and it'll dump to the correct file names. But I might care for some reason, and so we can detect EOF pretty easily. And right here what we're doing is we're going to go ahead and just print EOF if EOF. And that means, and if I run this, which I won't do, it'll print EOF just at the end of the first file that we read through. And if I had multiple files that I'm reading through, it'll print it between each file, essentially. I could have printed anything, but. So you use EOF to detect the end of input files. Anybody know what capital M does? You kids couldn't possibly know, so put your hands down. Yeah, this tells Perl to invoke a module or load a module at startup. So here we're going to use Perl -m list utils shuffle, and then we're going to, at the end of all of our iteration, we're going to print for shuffle. And so we're going to take our sequence and we're going to shuffle all of the input. We're going to shuffle all of the numbers between 1 and 10 here, essentially. So for each line of the file, this is kind of hard to follow. For each line of the file, we push that into an array that we just call S. That has no meaning whatsoever. At the very end, we're going to go ahead and shuffle S and then print each of the numbers that were passed in. There's another way to do it. So M loads a module at startup and optionally specifies an import list. So you can have the full power of Perl's libraries just from the command line. You can invoke M more than once. So here I'm loading the strict module or the strict pragma and the warnings pragma. And then I commit a strict violation right here by not declaring the variable foo. Here's one. I want to know what modules are loaded when I load data dumper. So I kind of like this one. Perl-m data dumper. So I'm loading that module, and then I'm going to print the keys in ink that tells me what modules have been loaded now. So now I know. Where is Perl finding data dumper? So now I'm going to load data dumper, and then I'm going to ask Perl what ink data /dumper, where that's located, and it'll tell me the location in the file system where that module's located. So Let me skip through. There's a bunch more slides. We won't go into all of them because it was a longer talk originally. But the point to all of this is that you now have another thing that you can add to your toolkit. Let's find it here. And the best way to take it from here is to look into Perl's documentation. Perl run, Perl var, and Perl syn will get you through just about everything that we covered in this demo. And so Perl is really is part of Linux's rich set of tools. And love it or hate it, it's something that is there that if we can learn to use it, can be useful to us and can simplify some of the tasks that we find ourselves doing on the command line. So that's everything that I've got, but the slides to this are on SlideShare at this location. And so you're welcome to look at those slides and spend a little bit more time kind of diving into it at a less breakneck pace. And that's it. Thanks for listening.